Welcome to DevOps Unlocked. In this video, I'll be showing you Minikube and Kubectl. Sounds exciting, right? Minikube is a one-node Kubernetes cluster that runs on your local machine, and it is meant for testing purposes. And Kubectl is a powerful tool that allows you to manage or manipulate Kubernetes clusters. These Kubernetes clusters can be either production clusters or, in this example, a test cluster, and we will be setting up our test cluster using Minikube. One of the master processes is the API server, which is an HTTP API that allows users or external components to communicate with your Kubernetes cluster. And if you're following along, we will interact with the API one of two ways, using Kubectl and the UI with the Kubernetes Dashboard. And finally, the goal of this video is to help you understand Kubernetes and Minikube so you can get started and on your own. And if you enjoyed this video and learned something, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I would greatly appreciate it. Alright, let's get started. Alright, I'll be using Ubuntu 18.06 running Docker. First thing you want to do is to update the packages on your local workstation. If you keep your OS updated, go ahead and skip forward a few seconds. And finally, you'll want to install the apt transport HTTPS package, which is required for installing Minikube. Now that your system is updated, we can begin by downloading the Minikube binary. I've provided a link to the download in the description below. When the download is complete, the next step is to copy it to your user local bin directory, and the destination file in user local bin will be named Minikube. And then the final step is to change the mode to 755 using the chmod command. One way to validate this step is by invoking Minikube version. Here you can see the version and the commit ID. So let's keep moving on, and we'll repeat similar steps to install Kubectl. Alright, so to install Kubectl, you'll want to copy and paste this curl command, which is provided below in the description. After that, you'll change the mode for this file to allow for the execution using chmod plus X. And then afterwards, you'll want to move the Kubectl binary to your user local bin directory. Okay, so to validate Kubectl, you can invoke the command kubectl space version -o space JSON. This will give you some JSON output. There's a couple things we want to check here as well. And those are going to be your client version, which is right here, and your server version, which is also right here. As we confirm these two are about the same version on version 1.22 in this example, we are good to move forward. Alright, so to start Minikube, it's really easy. Just type Minikube space start. This will take a couple seconds to start up. I'm actually speeding this part up in the video right now. Here we are, it is finished. And if I take my pen right here, I just want to point out that this line, this Kubectl, states that it's now configured to use the Minikube cluster and the default namespace. It's just something to keep in mind as we move on throughout this video. And then some other things just to point out is that Minikube is being powered by Docker, so this right here using the Docker driver indicates that. You can also specify other choices like none or SSH. In other videos and tutorials, sometimes it'll list HyperKit. I do believe that is deprecated though. Also want to point out that Kubernetes version 1.22 as well as Docker on 20.18. And yeah, I think this is just some additional details worth noting. If we invoke some Kubectl commands, for example, Kubectl config view, you can see our cluster, namespace, and context are all set to Minikube. This config is provided upon the installation of Minikube, as I pointed out earlier. We can also check the status of our cluster by invoking Kubectl cluster info. Here we can see that our control plane, which is hosting the API endpoint, is up and running. And also invoking Kubectl get nodes, you can see that we have a one node cluster that is serving as the master and the control plane. I personally use VS Code for programming and building out Kubernetes manifests. It's great because it offers extensions like the one shown here. I recommend it just if you're just starting out. Also, when you select your text editor, we are now ready to build out our first manifest file so we can deploy some pods to our local Kubernetes cluster. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to note that a manifest is a specification of a Kubernetes API object in JSON or YAML format. A manifest specifies the desired state of an object that Kubernetes will maintain when you apply the manifest. Okay, so this manifest file will be provided in the description below. However, it is important to understand what we are deploying, so I'm going to be breaking that down for you right now. Okay, so this second line right here tells us that the type of manifest file we're deploying is a deployment. In this line, we're indicating that the name of our deployment is Hello World, and we are deploying 2 pods. And then at the bottom here, this also indicates that we are going to be pulling an image called Echo Server, and the location of the image is right here under Kate's gcr.io. One last thing, I just want to point out that these double quotes are important around the location of your image. Otherwise, you'll get a syntax error when you try to deploy this. Deploying the pods is incredibly easy. You'll want to invoke kubectl apply-f and then the name of your file. I'm using tmux to split my terminal, and on the bottom I have watch kubectl get pods that refreshes the screen every 2 seconds. So when I deploy this, you should see this populated below. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Here we see the containers are creating, and now they're running. So this was successful. Invoking kubectl get events will provide you a history of actions that occurred in your cluster. You can add options to narrow down certain pods or times, but the default command will provide the most recent events at the top. If you pause the video, you can see these previous events that occurred in preparation for this video. Before we install the Minikube dashboard, you can invoke Minikube logs-f to view logs for your Minikube cluster in real time. If I invoke Minikube space dashboard, this will bring up the Kubernetes dashboard that will allow you to view your cluster through a GUI. And since there is not a whole lot going on, we can increase our replicas from 2 to 20 and redeploy our Hello World pods. This will give us some useful data. So I'll go ahead and invoke kubectl apply-f and then the name of the YAML file, Hello World deployment. And if I invoke kubectl get pods, you can see the status. Some are in pending, some are creating. So I'm going to do that again, but with the watch command. And you can see these are creating, some are now running. And now that it's complete, we can go ahead and relaunch our dashboard. So I'll invoke Minikube Dashboard once again, and this will launch. Now that we see some data here, this is what it looks like when there are pods deployed and you actually have some activity going on within your Kubernetes cluster. And so this dashboard can be useful for several reasons. Maybe you have a large Kubernetes cluster in your environment and you don't want to rely on the command line to check the state. Or maybe you want to compare 2 different objects side by side. This is one way to do so. However, there are other tools out there. One in particular is called K9s, which brings a similar view into your command line. And I'll have a video on that tool as a follow-up to this one at a later time. Alright, and so to delete your deployment, you'll want to invoke kubectl delete deployment and then the name of your deployment, which will be Hello World. Once you hit enter, you can do a watch kubectl get pods, and you'll see that your Hello World pods will begin draining until they are fully terminated. And that'll be it for this video. I hope you learned a lot about Minikube and kubectl. Please provide your feedback in the comments section below, or if you want me to cover a different topic, please provide that as well. If you're looking for another video to watch, I highly recommend my Ansible series, especially if you are new to DevOps and Linux and looking to get started in automation. Thanks again for your support, and take care.